to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, where the night is allowed to be gentle and you are allowed to be too. Tonight's story is about soft thunder and the quiet way it can steady the heart, like a warm hand resting over a pulse. Settle in the way you most love to rest. Let your shoulders loosen as if they've been unhooked from the day. Let your jaw soften, your tongue resting easily. If your eyes want to close, let them close. If they want to flutter, let them flutter. Nothing needs to be forced. Imagine the room around you growing calmer, as though the air itself has learned how to whisper. The sounds beyond your walls become distant and unimportant, like footsteps passing on a faraway street. Even the thoughts that arrive uninvited can be received with a tender nod, then allowed to drift on as if they were leaves floating down a slow river, unhurried, as if you're sighing into a pillow. Again, breathe in and out, letting the exhale be slightly longer, slightly softer, like a lullaby fading into the dark. Now, as the night wraps itself around you, a scene begins to form. Quiet land, a waiting sky, and thunder that does not frighten but comforts. You don't have to do anything but listen. You don't have to follow every detail. The story will carry you the way sleep carries a drifting feather. And as your breathing finds its own rhythm, the view in your mind slowly changes, and the telling becomes something you can simply observe, like watching lantern light ripple on water. In a valley folded between two long forested ridges, there was a town that seemed built for evenings. Its rooftops were steep and welcoming, the kind that held the rain like a secret, letting it slide away in patient streams. Chimneys rose from the houses like sleepy sentries, and windows glowed with small honeyed lamps. Even in daylight, the town felt as though it belonged to twilight, as if it had been stitched together from quiet hours and gentle weather. Like a polite guest, present, bright, and like a polite guest, present, bright, and never too loud. And evening would come early, as though the hills were protective arms drawing shadows close, encouraging everything to slow. The people of the town had a custom they never questioned, like a soft habit handed down through generations. When thunder came, no one flinched. No one hurried to shut the world away. Instead, they listened. They opened windows a little wider. They sat on porches with blankets around their shoulders. They kept kettles warm. They spoke more gently, as if thunder were a visitor that preferred quiet hospitality. They called it soft thunder because it never struck harshly in the valley. Storms arrived with rounded edges. The clouds didn't snarl, they rolled. The lightning, when it appeared, was distant and brief, like a pale ribbon unfurling in the far sky and then being tucked away again. And the thunder Oh, the thunder was like the voice of a great sleepy animal turning over in its den. It rumbled and sighed, and in its sound there was comfort. In its sound there was permission to rest. At the edge of the town, where cobblestones gave way to moss, and the last garden gate leaned slightly to one side, there stood a small house with a wide porch. The porch was always tidy, always welcoming, and always smelled faintly of dried herbs. Wind chimes hung from the rafters, their notes gentle and slow, like droplets tapping the rim of a teacup. In that house lived a person named Elowen, who had a talent that was not written on any sign and was never announced with pride. It was simply known in the way that certain truths are known in small places. Elowen could calm hearts. It was not a magical trick performed with bright lights or dramatic gestures. It was not a grand spell, it was a quiet craft, practiced with steady hands and a listening presence. Elowen made teas that tasted like comfort and smelled like childhood. Elowen kept soft blankets folded in baskets near the door, ready for whoever needed warmth. Elowen also kept a small shelf of objects that seemed ordinary: smooth stones, tiny bells, ribbons, a worn journal. But each had been chosen with care, as though it carried a note of peace inside it. On many evenings, people wandered up to the porch, not because they were in crisis necessarily, but because the day could be heavy, even when nothing was wrong. Sometimes someone came with a mind full of restless thoughts. Sometimes someone arrived with sadness that had no clear source. Sometimes it was only the kind of tiredness that builds quietly, like dust settling. Elowen would greet them with a nod and a gentle smile, and soon the porch would become a small, safe harbor. That night the sky had been gathering itself all day. Clouds, thick and soft as wool, drifted in from the west. They gathered above the ridges, swelling like slow waves. The air grew cooler, and the scent of rain touched everything with a fresh, mineral promise. Leaves turned their undersides outward, pale as silvery fish bellies, as though they were preparing for the storm's arrival, letting the scent float out into the dampening air. Someone somewhere played a slow tune on a fiddle, and the notes drifted along the street like a ribbon carried by wind. Elowen stepped onto the porch and looked up. A hush sat on the valley. It was not silence exactly. It was more like a held breath. Far away, somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder spoke. Low, rounded, unthreatening. It rolled through the air and arrived in the bones of the porch, in the railings, in the floorboards, in Elowen's chest, like a deep drum played with kindness. Elowen closed their eyes for a moment and listened. That first rumble always felt like an invitation. It said, "You can put down what you're carrying. You can stop bracing. The sky will do the work now." When Elowen opened their eyes, they noticed a flicker of light at the bottom of the porch steps. Not lightning, this was smaller, warmer. A lantern bobbed, approaching along the garden path. Someone was coming. The visitor climbed the steps slowly. Rain had not yet begun, but the air had dampened their hair and darkened the collar of their cloak. In the lantern's glow, their face looked tired in a way that was not only physical. The eyes held the faraway look of someone who had been walking with worry even while standing still. Elowen didn't ask questions. They simply opened the door wider and invited the visitor in with a gentle gesture. Inside, the house was warm and softly lit. A kettle hummed on the stove. A small fire in the hearth flickered like a sleepy heartbeat. The air smelled of chamomile, cedar, and something faintly sweet. Perhaps honey, perhaps memory. The visitor set down the lantern and exhaled, as if realizing only now how tightly they had been holding their breath. Elowen brought out 2 mugs and poured a tea so pale and soothing it looked like moonlight. The visitor wrapped their hands around the mug, and the warmth traveled up their fingers into their wrists like a message being delivered. Outside, the first rain began. It was not a sharp rain, not the kind that demanded attention. It was a soft rain, whispering across the roof. It slid down the window panes in slow lines. It tapped the porch steps with tiny, steady fingers. And beneath it all, thunder continued its low, gentle conversation with the valley. The visitor stared into the tea, watching the faint steam curl. Their shoulders were still high, lifted as if the body didn't know it was safe. Their jaw clenched and unclenched with the rhythm of an unspoken thought. Elowen sat across from them and listened, not to words, but to the spaces between them, to the pauses, to the way the visitor's gaze kept drifting toward the window as thunder rolled again. "It doesn't scare you?" the visitor finally asked, voice small. Elowen shook their head. "It used to," the visitor admitted. "Not the thunder itself. Something else. The way it reminds me how big everything is, how small I am." Elowen's eyes softened, and they nodded as though they understood deeply, because they did. Another rumble drifted through the air. The house did not tremble. It simply received the sound like a blanket receiving a sleepy body. "Elowen," the visitor said, and the name came out as though it was already familiar. "They say you can calm a heart." Elowen smiled, just slightly. "I don't fix anything," Elowen said softly. "I only help it remember its own rhythm." The visitor's gaze lifted. Elowen leaned forward a little, the way one might lean toward a candle in the dark. "Would you like to walk?" they asked. "When the rain grows steadier?" "Not far, just to the listening hill." The visitor hesitated, but thunder murmured again, and the sound was steadying. Somewhere in it was a promise that nothing would be rushed. "I think," the visitor said slowly, "I would." So they waited a while longer, drinking tea, listening to rain deepen on the roof. Elowen offered a blanket, soft, woven, smelling faintly of lavender, and the visitor accepted it, wrapping it around their shoulders like a tender embrace. Little by little, the tightness in their face loosened. Their breath began to lengthen. It didn't happen dramatically. It happened the way dusk happens, so quietly you only notice once it's there. When the rain became a steady, soothing sheet, Elowen gathered 2 cloaks and 2 small lanterns. They stepped out into the night together. The world outside had transformed. The streets shone as though polished. Puddles reflected the lamps, turning them into tiny pools of gold. The air smelled alive, washed clean. Trees murmured as raindrops moved through their leaves. And every so often thunder rolled like a distant, patient drum. The lanterns cast warm circles of light. The lanterns cast warm circles of light, and everything beyond those circles was soft shadow, friendly and deep. The visitor walked a little behind Elowen at first, as if unsure how to match the pace, but Elowen never hurried. Their steps were calm and measured, and soon the visitor's footsteps settled into the same rhythm, a slow, steady music. As they climbed, the sounds of town fell away. The fiddle tune, the murmured voices, the creak of doors. Everything became distant. What remained was rain and wind and thunder, as though the valley had decided those were the only sounds worth keeping. The listening hill was not steep or dramatic. It was simply a rounded rise covered in thick grass and ringed by a few old trees. From the top, one could see the whole valley, the town's lights scattered like fireflies, the ridges standing dark and protective, the clouds moving overhead like a slow procession. Elowen guided the visitor to a wooden bench beneath an ancient oak. The oak's branches spread wide, offering shelter without shutting out the sky. The rain fell in gentle sheets beyond the canopy, and here, beneath the leaves, the sound of it was softened into a lullaby. They sat. Thunder rolled again, deeper now, but still kind. The visitor flinched a little, more out of habit than fear, but then the sound continued past like a wave passing under a boat. Elowen held out their hand, palm up, and on it lay a small stone, smooth, dark, and speckled with pale flecks, like tiny stars. "This is a listening stone," Elowen said. The visitor looked skeptical, but curiosity tugged gently at their expression. "It's just a stone," the visitor said. "It is," Elowen agreed, "and it's also a reminder. Hold it." The visitor took the stone. It was cool at first, then quickly warmed in their palm. Elowen's voice remained soft, blending with the rain. "When thunder comes, many people brace against it. Their bodies become walls. But thunder isn't something you have to fight. It's only the sky moving. Try letting it pass through you instead." The visitor frowned slightly, as if trying to understand. Elowen continued, "Imagine your heart is a small lantern. Not a fragile lantern, just a steady one. When thunder rolls, it doesn't blow out your lantern. It only makes the world feel bigger around it. And your lantern," Elowen paused, letting the next rumble arrive, "can glow anyway." The visitor closed their fingers around the stone. Thunder rolled long and low. It seemed to start beyond the ridge, then travel like a gentle creature along the valley, brushing treetops, brushing rooftops, brushing the hill. The sound reached the bench and wrapped itself around them. The oak received it. The grass received it. Even the visitor's chest received it, and for a moment their breath caught, then softened. Elowen watched quietly. The visitor's shoulders lowered a fraction. Rain whispered through the leaves above. Droplets fell from the oak in slow, steady taps. The lanterns glowed at their feet, making small, warm pools of light that did not struggle against the darkness. The darkness was not an enemy here. It was a blanket. After a while, Elowen spoke again. "There is something the valley knows," they said. "Would you like to hear it?" The visitor nodded, slow. Elowen's gaze drifted out over the town lights. "Long ago," they began, "before the town had cobblestones, before the lamps were hung, there was a wandering storm that came to this valley." The visitor listened, the stone steady in their hand. "This storm," Elowen said, "had traveled far. It had been over oceans and deserts and crowded cities. It had carried harsh thunder, sharp lightning. It had frightened people. It had broken branches. And over time, the storm grew lonely because wherever it went, it was met with fear." The visitor's face softened, as if they could imagine that loneliness, an enormous thing with nowhere to rest. "One evening," Elowen continued, "the storm reached this valley. It rolled over the ridges, ready to be loud, ready to be rejected. But the valley was different then, too. It was wild, quiet, full of sleeping animals and tall grasses. The valley did not flinch. Thunder murmured again, as if agreeing. The storm paused," Elowen said, "and listened, because valleys can listen. They listen in the way they hold echoes. They listen in the way they hold fog. They listen in the way they cradle rivers. And the valley's listening was so deep, so steady, that it surprised the storm. The visitor's breath seemed to slow. The storm," Elowen said, "began to soften just a little. Its thunder grew rounder. Its lightning drifted farther away. It rained gently, and the valley drank it without complaint. Trees lifted their leaves to receive it. Stones shone. The river swelled happily." Elowen's voice was like the rain now, steady and smooth. The storm realized something. It did not have to prove its power. It could simply be. And in being, it could soothe. The visitor's fingers loosened slightly around the stone, as if their hand had learned it could rest. "Since then," Elowen said, "storms that come to this place remember. They arrive softer. They bring thunder that comforts. They come not to frighten, but to help the valley breathe." The visitor stared out into the dark. The town lights below, like a soft constellation. Thunder rolled once more, and this time the visitor did not flinch. Their eyes widened instead, not with alarm, but with wonder. The sound seemed to pass through them and out again, leaving no sharp edges behind. Elowen noticed, and their smile was small and satisfied. They sat in silence for a while, not an empty silence, but a full one. a silence made of rain and leaf, shush and distant rumble, a silence that let thoughts drift away without chasing them. After some time, the visitor spoke, voice quieter now, as if they didn't want to disturb the calm. My heart feels like it's always running, they confessed. Even when I'm sitting still, even when everything is fine, it's as though my chest is trying to outrun something. Elowen nodded gently. Many hearts do that, they said. They run because they learned somewhere along the way that running was safer than resting. The visitor's eyes shimmered with something tender. Elowen leaned back against the bench. But hearts, they said, are wise. They can learn again. They can remember the old rhythm, the one that matches the rain, the one that matches the tide, the one that matches the slow turning of the world. The visitor listened, and the words landed softly, like a blanket placed over shoulders. Elowen reached into their pocket and pulled out a small bell, no bigger than a thumb. It was made of silvered metal, dulled with age. A thin ribbon looped through its top. This bell, Elowen said, is for the moments when the mind becomes too loud. You don't ring it to make noise. You ring it to make a gentle boundary, like a little fence of sound that says, only calm thoughts may enter now. The visitor looked at the bell, then at Elowen. Elowen handed it over. The visitor's fingers curled around it carefully, as if holding something fragile and precious. You can keep it, Elowen said. The visitor opened their mouth to protest, but Elowen shook their head, smile patient. It belongs to whoever needs it, they said. Tonight that is you. The visitor swallowed, then nodded, as if accepting not just the bell, but the kindness behind it. Thunder rolled again, and this time it sounded even farther away, as though the storm had begun to drift toward the other ridge. The rain remained steady, soft, and the oak above them continued to shelter them like an old friend. Elowen, the visitor asked quietly, why do you do this? Why do you help? Elowen looked out over the valley. Their gaze seemed to rest on the dark shapes of trees, the gleam of wet stone, the slow movement of cloud. Because I was helped, Elowen said. Once long ago, I was the one whose heart ran. I was the one who thought thunder meant danger. I was the one who didn't know how to breathe without effort. The visitor's eyes softened. They could feel the truth in those words. And someone, Elowen continued, taught me to listen instead of brace. They taught me to let the world be big without feeling small. They taught me to rest inside myself. A warm, deep hush settled over the hill. It felt as though the storm itself was listening to, quieting in respect. The visitor looked down at the listening stone in their palm. They noticed now that it held warmth. It no longer felt cool. It felt like something that belonged to their hand, like something that could be carried and touched when needed. They sat longer, letting the night do its gentle work. The clouds above drifted in slow layers, and sometimes a faint thread of lightning flickered far away. so distant it was more like a blink than a flash. Each time thunder followed with a soft rumble, and each rumble seemed to smooth another edge in the visitor's chest. Eventually, Elowen stood, moving slowly so as not to disturb the calm. "Come," they said. "The storm is beginning to wander on. We'll walk back down, and the valley will feel even softer after the rain." The visitor rose as well, and the movement felt easier than before, as if the body had remembered it didn't need to be tight. They walked down the hill together. The path was darker now, but the lanterns made gentle circles of light, and the wet stones gleamed like small moons. Rain continued, but it had grown lighter, as though it was tiring, ready to settle. As they descended, the town's lights grew brighter, closer. The smell of baking bread still lingered faintly in the damp air. A cat darted across the street, pausing under an awning, then continuing on, unhurried. Somewhere, a door opened and a warm laugh drifted out. Then the door closed again, and the laugh became part of the night. When they reached Elowen's porch, the wind chimes rang softly, not from wind, but from a single drop of rain nudging them. The sound was delicate, like a sleepy question. Elowen opened the door and invited the visitor in again. Inside, the fire had settled into glowing embers, the kind that radiate warmth without asking attention. The kettle still held heat, patient as ever. Elowen poured another small cup of tea, this one darker and richer, tasting faintly of cinnamon and earth. The visitors sipped and sighed, their eyes half-lidded now. "You can stay tonight," Elowen said, "if you'd like. The guest room is ready. No one walks home alone after soft thunder." The visitor hesitated only a moment, then nodded. Relief moved through them like a warm tide. Elowen guided them down a hallway where framed paintings hung, simple scenes of trees, clouds, rivers. Each painting looked like it had been made by someone who loved quiet. In the guest room, a bed weighted with clean, cool sheets and a thick quilt. A small lamp glowed on the bedside table, its light soft and amber. On the windowsill, a little bowl of dried lavender sat, scenting the room with calm. The visitor set the lantern down. They placed the listening stone on the bedside table and the small bell beside it. Seeing them there, simple and steady, made their chest feel softer. Elowen stood in the doorway, not intruding, not hurrying. "You don't have to fall asleep quickly," they said quietly. "You only have to rest." The visitor's eyes grew heavy. "Thank you," they whispered, and the gratitude felt like a feather settling. Elowen nodded, then reached up and adjusted the window slightly, not closing it, only leaving it open a little so the night could breathe into the room. The rain outside had become a whisper now, and thunder was only an occasional distant murmur, like a farewell. Elowen turned down the lamp so the light became even softer. "Good night," they said, voice warm as the quilt. The visitor lay down. The bed welcomed them, shaping itself to their tiredness. Their bodies sank into the mattress, and for the first time in a long while, it felt safe to be heavy. Outside, the storm drifted farther away. The valley, washed clean, breathed slowly. Trees shone with wet leaves. Stones cooled. The river sang a quiet, steady song. And in the guest room, the visitor listened. They listened to rain tapering off. They listened to the hush that followed. They listened to their own breath, slow and easing, like a boat settling into still water. Their heart, which had been running for so long, began to slow, not abruptly but gently, as though it had been given permission. They reached a hand toward the bedside table, fingertips brushing the listening stone. The stone was smooth and warm, steady as a promise. The visitor didn't grip it tightly. They simply touched it, then let their hand relax back onto the quilt. A final roll of thunder murmured far away, soft and low, like a lullaby being hummed from another room. It traveled through the valley and faded, leaving behind a deep, comforting quiet. In that quiet, sleep began to gather. It gathered like fog in the morning, gentle and sure. It gathered like petals closing. It gathered like a blanket being pulled up over shoulders. The visitor's thoughts loosened. Their mind drifted. Their body became heavier, softer, calmer, and somewhere in the house's warm hallway, Elowen moved quietly, tending the embers in the hearth, setting the kettle for tomorrow, listening to the night the way the valley listened, without bracing, without fear, because soft thunder had come and calming hearts had followed. Now the story grows quieter, like the last drops of rain slipping from leaves. The house is warm, the bed is safe, the air is gentle, breath comes in, slow, and out, slower. Thunder is only a memory now, far away, softened by distance. The heart rests the way a hand rests in a pocket. The mind drifts the way a cloud drifts across a moon. Nothing needs doing. Nothing needs solving. Only sleep, arriving like a kind visitor. Only rest, settling like a quilt. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.